that ramification. But that overall feeling of listlessness and defeat, of impending doom, that's what I mean by depression. Addiction, I've defined as a disease that persists in the face of punishment. Addiction, when it involves these adverse consequences, is really behavior out of control. It's not necessarily willful in the sense that the behavior is intended. But this is how you know, or might guess, that somebody is suffering from addiction, when the adverse consequences begin to pile up. At this point in the disease, use of alcohol or drugs has ceased being an option. It's really a way of life for that individual. It's a necessity. Now let's talk about craving. Craving is the inevitable biologic consequence of being out of balance. A person who craves substance must use it, has no choice. And this is a progressive cycle, and it worsens. Remember the stages of addiction, going from mild to moderate to severe, and the slide downhill. A slide almost by gravity draws its object steadily downward, and that's what addiction does. It's like being caught in quicksand. The Chinese have this proverb which says, "The drowning man kicks hardest." And often, as a metaphor, an addicted person who is actively using is drowning, and an addicted person who is not actively using is suffering because of this need. Under a craving, I've listed the desire to have more. Does some substance, does one drink trigger a second so that you take the first drink, but the first drink takes the second drink, and the second the third? When you're without a drink or a drug, are you thinking, how soon? Do you need a drink or a drug really to get started? To be yourself? Does this need build up like hunger? And I use the word hunger intentionally because hunger is an instinct. Hunger is a message to eat organically. This hunger that I talk about in terms of addiction is a need to use. Is there a day when you don't use or drink? In street parlance, do you do just what you gotta do to get a drink or a drug? The law of addiction is inevitable. Once that invisible line is crossed, and it's invisible only in the sense of the outside world, and this is why I say that addiction is unique as a disease, it's got to be self-diagnosed. Only you know the answers to these questions, and I'm not here to answer them for you. I'm simply providing a blueprint that you can apply to your daily routine and see where stress management and relief fit in. And if addiction is beginning to make an encroachment on your life. The law of addiction, as I've defined it, looks at craving. And if you're experiencing craving under any of these four circumstances, let me suggest you look at your use of alcohol or drugs or gambling or food or maybe even relationships. When stress in and of itself becomes craving, and I don't mean stress simulating craving, I mean stress being craving, you're on the edge. You have that empty, dysphoric feeling. It's that burned out feeling. Use, alcohol and drugs, deals specifically with that feeling. When you become stressed, you say, I have the need to drink. You have this preoccupation. Maybe at noon you're looking forward to that drink at the end of the day. So stress equaling craving is one symptom. Secondly, environmental cueing. 60% of relapses in addiction occur given an environment. Could be work, could be social. It's very easy to lose control in social situations. Does this craving come up as you walk into a party or as you're tailgating at a football game and you drink or use, and afterward you say to yourself, but I didn't even think? Thirdly, withdrawals. Withdrawal is where addiction and chemical dependency merge. In other words, not using, you begin to manifest physical symptoms of shakiness, pale, sweat. In the course of development, addiction is way ahead of chemical dependency. In the mild stage of addiction, chemical dependency is unlikely, but getting into the moderate and severe phase of addiction, chemical dependency is almost certain. Most people who are addicted don't seek help for their disease until they become chemically dependent. Depression, I've listed with some question marks. Because again, I'm not defining depression in a clinical term, but let me suggest that withdrawal would naturally bring on a feeling of defeat, of organic restructuring. So what I'm suggesting at this point is that depression may be momentary or may be periodic as we stop our use or drink. The tragedy of addiction is that when it takes hold, sobriety becomes empty. Not using or drinking leaves life in a drag. We're listless. It's because organically we have had a brain change. We have lost our control over our pleasure centers in our brain. Instead of controlling pleasure, such as taking a walk in the garden, or going to a class, or playing with a child, being with friends, listening to music, going to a movie, reading a good book, eating a good meal. These are all simple pleasures with reward systems because instinctually these are necessary for our survival. These simple pleasures which help us survive are defeated, diffused, and no longer motivate us